The drums had been beating for hours that August night in 2003, their rhythm echoing through the Red Lake Reservation like a heartbeat that refused to fade. The annual Corn Moon Festival had drawn nearly 300 people to the community grounds in northern Minnesota. Firelight painted shadows across faces young and old, the smell of fry bread and pine smoke mixing with summer heat that clung to the skin like a second layer. 17-year-old Rachel White was there, a quiet girl with her mother's dark eyes and her father's lighter skin, a bridge between two worlds that never seemed to meet. She wore a simple cotton dress and a beaded necklace her grandmother had made before cancer took her. That night she laughed with cousins, served food to elders, and danced beneath the flicker of bonfires that glowed 12 feet high. Around 10 p.m., Rachel told her cousin Marie she was walking to the portable restrooms near the parking lot, just 200 yards away. Marie nodded, turned back toward the fire, and never saw Rachel again. By morning, laughter had turned to panic. Her bed was empty. Her clothes from the festival lay neatly folded on a chair. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her shoes sat by the door as if waiting for her to return. It was as though she had stepped out of existence. Her mother, Susan White, searched the festival grounds, now silent except for wind through the ashes of the fire pit. Her new husband, Dennis Crawford, told her not to worry. "Teenagers do this," he said. "She'll come home." But Susan knew better. Rachel wasn't reckless. She wasn't impulsive. She called the tribal police. Officer James Thompson took the report, calm, methodical, detached. He'd seen it before. Missing teens, most found within days. But not this time. Search parties combed the woods, calling her name into the endless trees. Nothing. No footprints, no torn fabric, no sign of struggle, only the echo of her name fading between the pines. Red Lake fell into silence, and that silence would last for 15 years. 5 days after Rachel vanished, a fisherman named Robert Harris was walking along Lake Vermilion, 8 miles from the reservation. Through the brush, he saw something that didn't belong, a flash of purple against the green. It was a backpack, Rachel's backpack. Inside were school notes, an MP3 player, and a half-empty bottle of water. But her phone, wallet, and ID were missing. Someone had carefully chosen what to leave behind. The discovery shifted the case from missing to abduction, but with multiple jurisdictions, tribal, county, and federal, the investigation collapsed into confusion. The FBI wanted proof of a crime before they'd commit resources. The sheriff assumed the girl had run away, and the tribal police didn't have the manpower to search the hundreds of square miles of forest surrounding the lake. Days turned to weeks. Suspicions fell on those closest to Rachel: friends, classmates, and eventually her stepfather, Dennis Crawford. He claimed he'd been asleep when Rachel disappeared. His wife couldn't confirm it, and when pressed by investigators, Dennis grew angry, defensive, the kind of anger that leaves an impression even when there's no evidence to back it up. But anger isn't proof, and without a body, the case began to die. By the end of that year, the FBI had withdrawn. The sheriff's office moved on, and Rachel White's name was filed away. Another missing girl from another small town. Her mother didn't move on. She couldn't. She called every week. She waited by the phone every night. And in 2008, she died of cancer, still waiting for a call that would never come. For more than a decade, the Red Lake case sat buried in dust and silence. Until 2014, a new police chief took command. Jacob Morrison, a Marine veteran, disciplined and deliberate. He'd seen what time did to the truth, how it rotted in filing cabinets until no one cared to open them again. He decided to start with the ghosts, and Rachel White's file was the loudest one. The evidence boxes were brittle from age, plastic bags yellowed, labels fading. Inside one was her backpack, sealed and forgotten. Inside another, fragments of soil, fabric, and hair samples never analyzed. Morrison sent everything to the FBI lab in Quantico. Weeks passed, and then a call. There was DNA. It didn't match Rachel, and it didn't match anyone in her family. The profile belonged to a man named Thomas Mitchell, a former lumber foreman whose property sat 12 miles from where Rachel's backpack was found. Back in 2003, Mitchell had been questioned once, dismissed as irrelevant. He'd told investigators he'd been home all night, alone. No one had followed up. Morrison dug deeper. He found reports of workplace harassment against Mitchell, complaints filed by women at his lumber mill in the late 90s, all quietly settled, a pattern of predatory behavior that had gone unchecked. One of the women remembered seeing him at a gas station that summer, talking to a native girl who looked young, 16, maybe 17. She didn't think much of it then. Now she wasn't so sure. In May 2018, pipeline workers digging through a wooded lot on what used to be Mitchell's land made a discovery. Beneath 4 feet of soil, wrapped in decayed plastic sheeting, were human remains. The skull showed signs of blunt trauma. The body had been there for years. When the lab results came back, they confirmed what everyone feared. The remains belonged to Rachel White. 15 years after she disappeared, the forest had finally given her back. Morrison reopened every connection, every witness. One name kept reappearing: Charles Watson, Mitchell's right-hand man at the mill. When questioned, Watson looked hollow, defeated. He said he'd been waiting years for someone to come, and then he confessed. He told Morrison that Mitchell had called him the night Rachel vanished, said there'd been an accident. When Watson arrived, Rachel was already dead, her head bleeding, her body wrapped in plastic. Mitchell claimed she'd fallen, that he'd just wanted to talk. But Watson saw the truth. He helped bury her in the woods, too afraid to refuse, too guilty to speak. 15 years of silence later, he couldn't hold it anymore. The weight of what they'd done had eaten him alive. With Watson's confession and DNA proof, there was no room left for doubt. On Thanksgiving Day, 2022, officers surrounded a quiet house in Bemidji. Thomas Mitchell opened the door wearing an apron that said, "World's Best Grandpa." Inside, his family was setting the table for dinner. When the cuffs clicked shut, he didn't fight. He just stared at the floor and said, "You found her, didn't you?" The arrest sent shockwaves through the community. A respected man, a volunteer, a murderer, and a truth buried longer than Rachel herself. Rachel's brother, Marcus, stood over her grave months later. He said his mother hadn't lived to see justice, but she'd known it was coming, because grief, like truth, doesn't stay quiet forever. Now when the corn moon rises over Red Lake and the drums begin again, some swear they hear another rhythm beneath the beat, a whisper carried through the pines, soft and steady, like a voice calling home. They say the forest remembers what the world forgets, and on certain nights, when the firelight flickers, you can still feel it. Rachel White's story, no longer buried in the dark. Subscribe to Dark Evidence, because some truths refuse to die.